Hi friends, and thank you for joining me for another short talk. I thought I should give a lecture today explaining or responding to the idea, the false notion that many people have that a convert cannot be involved in conversions. Or in other words, that a convert cannot oversee conversion. And friends, this is one of those topics that is rarely ever challenged. Not that the vast majority of rabbis actually believe this, but rather it's been an idea that has only really arisen possibly in the last 25 years, when organizations like mine have begun performing conversions. And yes, we have converts in our Beit Din. Now, I haven't performed a conversion in over 4 years, and I'm really out of that world. However, I'd like to give a lecture to educate those who erroneously teach that it's against halakha for a convert to perform a conversion or to oversee a conversion. So, let's start with the sources. One of the main places people quote erroneously regarding this topic of disqualifying converts who find themselves overseeing conversions is Shulchan Aruch, Choshen Mishpat, Siman Zayin, Sif Aleph, Beit Din Shel Gimel, Shehaya Echad Mechem Ger, a court of 3 of which one was a convert, Harei Ze Pasul Ladun LeYisrael. A court like this is pasul, is unfit, ladun, to litigate or to judge an Israelite. Elaim ken chayta imo miYisrael, unless his mother were a born Israelite. Veger dan et chavero hager, afal pi she'en imo miYisrael. However, a convert may judge his fellow converts, although his mother is not a native-born Israelite. Okay, so you got that so far? Now, the reason I'm starting here is because this actual halakha has a piece of everything that we're going to expound on. But I'll tell you what, even from the outset, even from an erroneous understanding that this means that converts are not allowed to judge, if you knew nothing but actually read the whole halakha, which they don't do, this says that a convert is allowed to judge other converts, which simply means that if this is all that actually meant, that of course converts could oversee conversion. But it's deeper than that. In other words, the ignorance gets a lot deeper. And on that notion, those of us who are familiar with how halakha is later compiled, specifically in Shulchan Aruch, know that when Rav Yosef Karo was compiling his Beit Yosef that ultimately got abridged down to Shulchan Aruch, he took the best out of 3. Which 3? The Rif, the Rosh, and the Rambam. So that's why it's no surprise that this is just a reiteration of what appears in the Rambam. The truth is, Shulchan Aruch is actually about 90% Rambam. As the Rambam writes in Hilchot Sanhedrin, Perek Bet, the 2nd chapter, Halakha Yud Bet, the 12th Halakha, which states the same thing, that a court made up of a convert cannot litigate against a born Israelite. But what they fail to mention is that the Rambam actually tells us what kind of judges he's talking about. Judges that could litigate, i.e. actually judge, as it states in Hilchot Sanhedrin, the 4th chapter, the 1st halakha. It says, Echad Beit Din Hagadol ve'echad Sanhedrin Ketana, o Beit Din Shel Shlosha. In order to act as a judge in the Supreme Court, in the Great Sanhedrin or the Small Sanhedrin, or even in a court of 3, Sarich Sheye Echad Mehen Samuch Mipi Hasamuch. One must have actual smicha by someone who also had actual smicha. Now, what type of smicha are we talking about? Moshe Rabbeinu samuch Yehoshua bayad, like Moses, our teacher, did with Yehoshua, giving him smicha. Shenemar, as it says, Vayismoch et yadav alav vaytzaihu, that he laid his hands on him and commissioned him. It also says that, like this, he ordained the 70 elders, and the divine presence rested upon them. The elders ordained the others, who in turn ordained them. In other words, this is talking about people with actual smicha, which would mean what? Which would mean that even the halakha that they use to say that converts cannot sit on a Beit Din for conversion, that they themselves, and virtually everyone alive today, would also be pasul, would also be unfit to sit on this type of court. Do you get it, my friends? First, not only does it not apply, because the halakha says that a convert could judge other converts, but even from their mischievous attempt to degrade and insult converts, which is not a rabbinic law, like these are all rabbinic laws, this is an actual Torah law. They're trying to insult converts here, telling them that any conversion made by a convert is pasul, it's unfit, it's not kosher. Even with this same law, it would also disqualify any other rabbi today from performing a conversion, even someone considered a dayan today. Because that's what one requires to actually judge, to litigate, not just to hear a case out. Or regarding something like conversion, which has nothing to do with litigation, but witnessing. And that's another area that people get really stuck in today. What does litigation or judging have to do with conversion? Honestly, what are you judging? As a matter of fact, all sources teach that regarding the witnesses, that's right, just witnesses, that when it's required, if it's required, it's only during the immersion. You're witnessing the person go down. This is why it's really bad grammar for someone to say, I converted someone, or ask someone who converted you. According to the halakha, you're converting yourself. What everyone else is doing is just witnessing you go down. Which is why even Tosfos and the Rosh are of the opinion that you may not need witnesses at all. And the Rambam really reiterates this idea. It says in Asur Biyah chapter 13, Halakha 9, it says that the following law regards a female convert we see who conducts herself according to the ways of Israel at all times. For example, she immerses herself after being a nida, she separates truma from dough or the like. And to a male convert who follows the paths of Israel, for example, he immerses himself after a seminal emission and performs all the mitzvot. These are considered as righteous converts, even though there are no witnesses to testify before whom they converted. Did you hear that, friends? Then it repeats it again. It says, nevertheless, if they come to marry amongst the Jewish people, we do not allow them unless they bring, what? Again, Adam, witnesses. I mean, I'm sure they're not making the argument that converts are also pasul Adam, unqualified witnesses. See, friends, this is an argument that's not thought through. Even Rav Yosef Karo Shulchan Aruch, in the laws for conversion, in Yoreh De'ah 268, the third halacha, the third sif, he states that even if the conversion only has 2 witnesses, that conversion is still valid b'diavad. Well, I thought we just learned earlier that in order to litigate, in order to judge, you need at least 3. Again, because this isn't judging, this is witnessing. To witness, according to the Torah, you need at least 2. Are you catching my drift, friends? And even in the Asur Biyah, in the Rambam, in Mishneh Torah, I think this is the clear statement of them all. It states in the 13th chapter, it says Gimel Hediotot, that basically 3 laymen, 3 non-Torah scholars, i.e. not actual judges, that any 3 individuals could perform a conversion. Quote that the next time someone asks you which rabbi converted you, or even make the sillier statement that only rabbis could perform conversion. Now mind you, there are no rabbis today. Rabbis were men with actual smicha. Now I know that the title exists nowadays, but that's because in 1538 of the Common Era, the Ma'aribe Rav in Sfat instituted the ceremonial form of smicha we have nowadays. But it's not actual smicha going back to Moshe Rabbeinu. So no, the halakha does not teach that only a rabbi could perform a conversion. But like we just showed, anyone who's eligible to be a kosher witness could witness an immersion. And even an immersion for conversion. And it's really not that much of a big deal. I mean, Shulchan Aruch also in Yoreh De'ah 268, it says that even if the person immersed for some other reason, that immersion could be counted towards conversion. In other words, if someone is immersing themselves for some other reason, i.e. someone who's not Jewish, what the halakha is stating is that even someone just watching you go down, in other words, it doesn't even have to be a formal thing. 3 Jews watching you go down in the water is enough to count for conversion. Not some formal Beit Din. And for sure, not a Beit Din that has smicha. And the reason I've stuck to Shulchan Aruch and Mishneh Torah and Chazal is that when I discuss this topic with other rabbis, they'll quote Achronim, rabbis from our generation, saying, well, this rabbi says it's questionable, and this other rabbi also says it's questionable. Rabbis of our generation, or even that lived 200, 300 years ago. No, the reason we stick to the Rambam mainly, and the Chazal, the Divrei Sel from what appears in the Mishnah and the commentaries to the Mishnah, is because that's where halakha comes from. It comes from the Beit Din HaGadol. In other words, Shulchan Aruch is reiterating what the Rambam says. The Rambam codified what Chazal ruled, and that's how halakha is developed. Not people quoting some rabbi who lived 10 years ago or even 200 years ago, giving their opinion on the thing, in some way making it harder for people to convert, limiting who can and cannot witness or perform a conversion. Understand? This is the way halakha functions. This is what separates amateurs from those who actually know how to learn Torah and halakha. Now, another halakha that's thrown my way in a quite disgusting manner to in some way prove, well, if they can't do this, they for sure can't do that. People quote Mishneh Torah and Hilchot Melachim in the first parak where it says that a convert may not serve as an army commander or given any positions of authority in Israel, that he's not even allowed to supervise the allocation of water from a stream to various fields. Now, I'm not trying to justify the Rambam's attitude towards converts or rabbinic Judaism's attitude towards converts, although the Rambam elsewhere praises them, even says that there is absolutely no distinction between him and converts, as he writes in his letter to Ovadia Ger. But lest anyone think that this means that they're not to be given any powers of authority. Not that one needs authority to perform a conversion, because we just showed that the Rambam said that 3 hediotot, 3 laymen, some even translate as idiots, could perform a conversion or oversee an immersion. But if this does mean that a convert is not even allowed to adjudicate a Gentile, how about the Rambam in the same Sefer, the 10th chapter, the 14th halakha, where it states that even non-Israelites could sit in judgment over non-Israelites, telling us that certainly one who became Jewish can also oversee non-Israelites in litigation, lest someone make the claim like they do, that because they can't be given any positions of authority, that they can't oversee a conversion. Do you hear what I just said? That if Gerim Toshavim, from a halachic legal perspective, are allowed to adjudicate other Gentiles, how is it that a convert to Judaism is not allowed to adjudicate a Gentile? They're transitioning from being a Gentile to being a member of the Jewish people. And friends, I wanted to touch on this notion that I mentioned earlier of not justifying all the statements made against converts and conversions by Chazal and even Rishonim, and worse, even Achronim. Friends, the Torah is not against converts nor conversions, nor does it ever say anything derogatory about people who convert to Judaism. And it seems like the average rabbi, even in Mishnaic times, were a bit bipolar on the issue. In other words, the reason the Torah could not have such an attitude is because virtually everyone important to God in Torah was a convert. Heck, in the Mishnah, we see the same things, that it was the converts who basically saved the Jewish people before and even after the Churban. Judges like Shammai of Talion, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Akiva, Torah giants like Onkelos. Okay, fine, the halakha may have changed later on, but that does not in any way speak for the Torah. In other words, all these derogatory statements made about converts are rabbinic. Now, I'm a rabbinic Jew. I believe in Torah Shabbat Peh. I believe in halakha. However, I don't believe that the words of Chazal are the base of my religion or make up my hashkafa. No, that comes from Torah Shebiktav, from the 5 books of Moses. But fine, we keep halakha because, like the Rambam says, Beit Din Hagadol Sheber Yerushalayim Chem Iker Torah Shabbat Peh, that it's the Beit Din Hagadol, the Sanhedrin, that ruled from Lishkat Hagazit, that are the Iker, they are the source of Torah Shabbat Peh. And because what it states in Parashat Shoftim, we have to obey them. Fine. But we hope one day that there's another Sanhedrin to override a lot of these halachot regarding converts and conversion. And I know, friends, that off the bat, this is not so easy to understand. So I'm really trying to put it in layman's terms here. Because if someone just reads Shulchan Aruch straight through, or perhaps some portions of Mishneh Torah, without getting it in context, they could come up with erroneous notions. Because we know that sometimes terms are used loosely, especially in Shulchan Aruch. In other words, there are times that it calls a witness a judge, and it calls a set of 3 Jews a Beit Din. But that has to be understood alongside the underlying halachot that clarify things. The understanding that any group of 3 Jews, when dealing within legal matters, is referred to as a Beit Din. But that has to be understood with what the Rambam says in the 5th chapter of Hilchot Sanhedrin, the 12th halakha, where he says that in Galut, the notion of the Beit Din does not exist, and that the concept of a Beit Din applies only with regard to judges who have been given smicha in Eretz Yisrael, i.e. real dayanim. Because I understand the errors made. Someone would just pick up a sefer and say, oh, well, here, it mentions a judge, it mentions a Beit Din, and they automatically begin getting visions of grandeur, of them possibly becoming one of these Dayanim, without knowing that the line of smicha was broken. No one runs an actual court nowadays. And the most people could do nowadays when placed in such positions, because there is an allowance to hear cases the halakha calls everyday occurrences, but limits to cases of financial loss, admissions of liability, loans, and cases of common property damage. And that's it. In other words, cases that require no actual judging or adjudicating or imposing any penalties outside of just returning what you stole or repairing what you broke. So don't get me wrong, I could see how some of these things could be misunderstood.